Smith.
Apologize.
Oh
Got that
wow,
part.
that's that's scary to hear that. It's like, looks like the NSA has just tapped into our meeting and announced that they're recording. So, and in my life, that is not just a joke. So I'm sorry. I'm married to an artist, Sean Meyers, who is a metalsmith, teaches at the University of Central Oklahoma, has her own studio and makes beautiful, beautiful things. Um, and we have three children, and two of them are married, and we have three granddaughters. So life is good, even in the very conservative state of Oklahoma. We've been able to carve out some associations and friends that are precious to us after all these years. So that's me, and I understand that we're primarily going to talk about saving Jesus from the church. And I should have sent Greg, and thank you, Greg, for the invite. First of all, I should have sent the study guide, or did I send the study guide? I can't remember. There is actually a study guide for the book. So if you still want it, I will send it after our time together. Um, but yeah,
You
um,
have one for saving God from religion, the study guide?
yes,
And
yes,
we'll definitely take that one because we haven't started that yet.
sounds good. Just don't let me forget that I said I was going to do this. Okay, because I'm at the point where as I get up from one room and walk to another room to get something, on the way, I forget why I was going to that room and what I was going to get. So don't let me forget. Um,
Pastor thing. Well, probably it's a human.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for everyone else's sake, we've been Rob and I've emailed a little bit, and God willing, if we can get the Delta variant under control, we'd love to have you back in person too. And you sounded willing for it. Although now we're in the northern part of the state, so there we go.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Um,
okay. I'll just fly into Chicago.
So we're gonna take advantage of the fact that we read Saving Jesus from the Church, basically most of the spring, kind of around Easter onward. And we very quickly, we're used to doing some Bible book studies in this group together, but we were not prepared for how dense, and I mean it in a really positive way, how much material you were having us chew on chapter to chapter. So we slowed down and just said, let's just do one chapter a week and just pump the brakes a little bit and really have some conversation about what we're reading, because some of us, particularly those who are probably coming from a tradition like the Episcopal Church, this information is stuff that resonates very clearly, kind of a hungering in our heart. But a lot of us, those gathered here, come from a more traditional, conservative upbringing. It's a very Irish Catholic area, especially too. So I suspect, and I've heard people say that this was there's a lot of eye-opening things that you pointed out in Saving Jesus. I wondered if you would take a moment, just walk us back to late 2000s, what you were doing and how the book came to be, and maybe what was the urgency at that time to have that book made or written.
Sure. Sure. So somewhere, and I talk about this in the opening part of the book, I came home after church one day. So I've been a parish minister my whole life, and we had had communion. I'd served communion that day, and I sort of took a nap, which is sort of standard practice for older clergy on Sunday afternoons. I don't know how Greg is, but I always take a nap. And during that nap, I had a dream. And in the dream, I wondered if I was a Christian, if I could even call myself a Christian, because of what was going on in the world. Um, Post 9/11, what happened to our relationship to American Muslims, the wars that we launched, the sort of hyper masculinity that was evident in our leadership, our desire to make everyone more like us, cure gay people of being gay, um, continue to not trust women with their own decisions. You name it. I looked at the so-called Christians around me and said, I don't want to call myself a Christian anymore, and that's a fairly a serious problem if you're a pastor of a Christian church. So I started wondering, well, what could I do to put down some thoughts that would turn this grievance and this confusion into something more positive? And really, the impetus was, I mean, first of all, I can't help myself. I can't keep from writing. I grew up the son of an English literature professor, and my mother was an English teacher in junior high school. And so words and ideas were part of my upbringing. And when people ask me, why do I write? Why do I write books? Because it's a long ordeal. The answer is that I get some kind of idea in my head that I cannot get out any other way except to write it out. So it's almost a form of exorcism. It's a literary exorcism because I want to understand exactly what it is I'm feeling. And when I write it and revise it and write it and revise it, it clarifies my own thinking for me. And I think that's a good thing about writing. And it's a good thing about book discussion groups. So congratulations for reading, thinking, asking questions, and you should do that until the day you die. As far as this particular book's concerned, it's really based on that simple premise. Can I call myself a Christian given the behavior of so many people who call themselves Christian? And if I can't, what am I going to call myself? And what is my theological grievance? It is very simple. Christianity started off as a way of life, a way of being in the world, and turned into a set of creeds and doctrines that demand total agreement. And we argue about what we believe instead of going out into the world and doing what we know we've been called to do, and then reflecting on that action, rather than what we often do in church, which is to study a problem, perhaps issue a paper on it, and then put the paper in the file somewhere and think that we've done something, or we pass a resolution at our ecclesiastical meetings, whatever they are, and we condemn all manner of evil in the world, and then we think we've done something to address all manner of evil in the world. So it's the basic frustration I have with the idea that you can end up intellectualizing Christianity, which you really cannot. And I'm all in favor of the intellect and thinking. I think we should do more of it, thinking, that is. But to think that that is the end of it is disturbing to me. And so I wanted to be on record making the case that it is always, always in the way we treat the other that one's true spiritual measure can be arrived at, and that much of what the church is involved in today is institutional self-preservation and maintaining a certain amount of, being able to pay for things, which I understand. You have to pay for things, but that we used to be, I think, I don't think I wrote this book to advance anything new, but to recover something very old and make it sound new again. So that was the idea. And that's probably enough. I don't want to I can talk and talk and talk. You don't need that. So I'll just stop right there and we'll go from there. Okay, Greg?
I'm not going to hog the questions too much, but I wonder, and you're a PK, which if people don't know, that means priest's kid or pastor's kid,
Yeah.
preacher's
kid.
You're double PK, right? Yeah. Remember that in the book?
Yeah.
So obviously your upbringing is a lot of pressure. It's almost like, pressure to go into the family business a little bit. When you were young, did you resist? Did you say no way, or how did you come back to ministry?
Well, I didn't want to be a PK if that meant people thought that I never did anything bad or I was just this super well-behaved kid. So I went through a period of rebellion in college, and this is the Vietnam era and the 60s. So, which I'm absolutely glad I grew up in that particular decade. I don't apologize for that at all. But my dad was not a typical preacher. He was a social gospel, peace and justice kind of preacher. He was a powerfully intelligent human being, articulate from his teaching and love of English literature. So, yeah, I had a mentor. I also looked at the life that he had with one foot in the sanctuary and one foot in the classroom. And I thought, that is a good life. That is something I might seriously consider. And then the rest is history.
Fantastic. And the other question I had, and I promise I'm going to shut up, everybody. I wonder when Saving Jesus from the Church came to being, or maybe when you were in the editing stage, or even as it was being published and or being read by others or peers, did you experience any fear or worry about either your job safety as a pastor or a teacher, or were you getting pushback from people, and how did you kind of deal with that?
Well, I get pushback from people outside of my church. I didn't get any pushback from my own congregation because Mayflower had been listening to me for quite a long time. I was there 36 years, which is unheard of. And I had already been there, let's see, Saving Jesus came out in 2009. I became pastor of Mayflower Church in 1985. So the people who might have objected to anything in the book were gone. Um, you know, that's not always a bad thing when someone who's very unhappy in church and not getting what they need leaves. We should have some kind of blessing ceremony for them going to another church because that's probably what they need to do. And certainly it can leave the situation better where the place from which they left. So I have gotten some pretty nasty communications from people over my lifetime about my theology and the fact that I'm probably going to cause a lot of people to go to hell, and a lot of letters to the editor and the newspaper in Oklahoma. So I sort of have had that experience my whole life. But it didn't come, Greg, from within my congregation. They were entirely supportive. They are a remarkable, remarkable bunch of people for Okies. So I never worried for my safety, and I never worried in particular about my job safety.
Great, great. And I'm presuming you never worried about God or Jesus's feelings about what you were saying, right?
Well,
The
I was
conviction of the gospel.
hoping, we all hope they're going to be pleased, right? But we can't be sure. I've got the same God, I've got the same Bible everybody else has. Well, I mean, I've got the right version, but you know what I'm saying. I've got the New Revised Standard Version. I've got the Harper Study Bible, right, Greg? Everybody has to have a Harper Study Bible.
And that's what we want.
And I keep thinking, I've thought my whole life, if I were as radical, if I were 1/10 as radical as Jesus presents himself in the New Testament, and particularly in the Sermon on the Mount and the parables, they would fire me. I mean, I would not have a chance. So I always felt like I was trying to catch up to being as radical as Jesus and always falling short. And people were in the meantime saying, don't you think you're going out on a limb and off on your own thing? And it's so you can be a mad prophet decrying the hypocrisies of our time and all of that. But I never felt that way. My politics and my theology comes out of my study of the teaching and the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. That's where it comes from. It's not something I had and then forced onto the New Testament.
Right. Beautifully said. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to everybody else. And I know some of you have had questions lingering since the spring. I think I see Carolyn, you've unmuted, so you're ready. Great.
Yes.
Please.
What we didn't say to you, Robin, is that this is a group of people, and not everyone in this group is here every single week or, reads the book or whatever. You don't even have to read whatever book we're going to talk about or watch whatever video we're going to talk about or whatever news report, because we do all of those different things. So it's really a forum as opposed to a book group. It just happens that we've read a couple of books. So I want to tell you what my one sentence summary from your book is, because some of the people that maybe didn't read the book, this would be useful to you. was in chapter 5. And you said, what if faith, okay, this is a paraphrase. So what if faith could become again a radical trust in God and the essential goodness of creation? And that was just like, you didn't even need the whole rest of the book for me, because all the rest of it was just singing my song. Hearing that sentence made me want to take action. And we discussed that sentence and that kind of thing throughout the entire time period. Again, some people didn't even read whatever chapter it was, or didn't even have the book. And there was just so much discussion because you gave us so much to discuss that you could almost be in adult forum week after week and not watch whatever video, read whatever book or whatever news report, because everybody is, it's a fabulous group. And we've been on, summer break since June, and people that I have talked to between that time period and now, because I live in Missouri, so virtually I don't get to see everybody on Sunday morning. We all have missed this terribly. So I'm thrilled that you're here with us this first Sunday. And hey, if you have nothing to do on Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock, come on every week.
Sure. I'll just get a frequent flyer pass to Chicago.
Yeah.
No, look, we're on Zoom.
Oh, I know.
You just roll out of bed and come.
Okay. That's very kind for you to say. And that sentence does sum up what I believe about the life of faith. Those two things, trust is a huge thing. People should give the benefit of the doubt in the church. At Mayflower, we had a little saying. We would say BOD. If someone got mad about something, we'd say BOD, which meant benefit of the doubt. Because I'm usually wrong when I think someone has said something. I think it's critical, or they're mad at me or something. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with anything except my misinterpretation of the facts. So I think trusting people and expecting good things from them should be a Christian virtue. And as far as the goodness of the earth is concerned, we're going to know how good the earth is as we find out further how distressed it is, how ill it is, how much it needs to return to its own health as a living thing.
Excellent. Somebody have a question in here? Questions?
Yeah. So I don't know. I raised my hand. I don't know if that works or not. So just to link on to the BOD and a background, even though I'm Episcopalian, I teach at a Jesuit university. And part of the Jesuit concept of good conversation is giving someone the benefit of the doubt that they are coming from a place of truth, that they're not trying to be malicious, that they are really trying to give you their truth, and to listen with that kind of openness and understanding. And so if to anyone, if you ever have a chance to look at the Jesuit principles of conversation, it's actually something I want to send to every member of Congress, right? It's a new way of looking at how do we talk with each other.
Carol, I have a theory about the Jesuits, who are, of course, my favorite kind of Catholic. Their schools and their educational programs are so good, they end up making Episcopalians out of everybody.
You are so right.
Or they drive them completely out of the church and they become, I don't know, atheists or agnostics or something.
Yeah, we won't talk about all the Indians who got their hands cut off of that. But anyway.
Yeah, there's that.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question. So living in the middle of a very conservative place, and your congregation being used to you preaching a social gospel, have your folks figured out how to talk to the people outside your church in ways? Have you had to practice this? Do you have any advice because we also live, New Lenox is in a pretty predominantly white, even though we're close to Chicago, we're predominantly white, and there's lots. I mean, as I drove through New Lenox for coffee on Thursday, I noticed this gigantic sign hanging over the road that talks about guns. There's a new gun shop or something and training in guns. I was just like, oh boy, that's reassuring. But so, you know, how do you talk to people who are, they consider themselves Christians, but they don't seem to understand what this whole concept is about? What can you offer us?
Well, I think first of all, we have the problem that you're describing uh, applies to all of us. We have people in our families we have trouble talking to, our extended families, our in-laws. We have associates and friends that we know if we bring up certain topics, we're just going to end up having a very unpleasant time. Um, I would say that it's not important to rush right out and try to talk to everybody. Because there may be some people that it's better not to talk to, but just to be kind to, because your kindness may end up doing more to invite a conversation that would be less confrontational than anything else you could do. The idea that you fundamentally value every other human being per there being a human being is the baseline for everything. The other is what it's all about, whether it's in this group of people studying together or people who hung up the banner about the gun. I mean, we have gun shows in Oklahoma every week, and our banners always have an AR-15 icon on them. And I never thought that I would live to see military style assault weapons in individual people's hands. And we are in a crazy, dangerous place. All we can do in the meantime is give people an alternative to that madness and make them envious about what it is we've got that they might like also to have. Okay? So that's why actually envy, a sort of spiritual envy, is a very good evangelistic tool. What is this person on? You know, where did they get this peace from? Why is it they're being so nice to me when I hate their guts? Okay, we have to go through the world disarming people, and I choose that word in light of this subject advisedly, disarming them, because the fundamental conflict in church communities and the dominant culture is the degree to which the church embraces violence in all forms, when it should be rejecting violence in all forms, not just violence from guns, but violence against those we love, violence against the earth, our tendency to be authoritarian with our military and think we can establish democracies around the world and make people more like us. If we haven't won a war in a long time, and we just lost another one, and I know that that may sound harsh, it just happens to be true. And one of the things that the church needs to be able to do is speak the unvarnished truth, no matter what the consequences are. And our Roman recipe, you get peace through strength, peace through military power. That is the Roman Empire's Pax Romana that Jesus came to stand against. So if we're going to stand against the Pax Americana, we're going to run into trouble, but we're also going to be faithful.
Beautifully said. Next question. Anyone in person?
I'm sorry?
Just asking if anyone in person has a
Okay.
listening.
Well, I do. I'm a listener, and I'm also was there in the 60s and 70s, and very much of an activist. I was in seminary then, and so many of the things that we protested, you know, we were there in Chicago with Richard Daley and all that stuff. The seminarians, and there was an organization there, seminarians organized for racial justice, and we would go to these big protests and observe people trying to stir up deliberately. You know, it was it was a real education for me, the suburban person. And I I don't know, I used to, after I got married, I became a caregiver for several people in my family, and I couldn't be as involved, and at least I felt I couldn't. I didn't have time, and my ideas never really changed. And I began to wonder, though, later, where is everybody? You know, it's like there was this big outburst against the war and racism, and then everything sort of faded away. So I have been involved to the extent I could, but here now, I am in chemo and I'm 79 years old, and I'm thinking, okay, you know, how can I, what can I do here? And, I don't know very many people. So I'm thinking, okay, what's going on in my head is the right stuff,
Yeah.
but I'd like to share it in some way. And I find that in this church, but I'm really at a place where I'm thinking about what I can do, not what I can't do.
Right.
And one of my frustrations is that, having been an activist, I'm looking for, I guess I'm looking for ways to be involved. And I just wondered what you thought about those of us that are older and really can't march anymore and
Mhm.
all that.
Well, first of all, Mary, I would say that the marching you did, the good from that does not go away just because it was in the past. I don't think any good deed, any act of kindness, any righteous call for justice, nonviolent resistance. I mean, Dr. King told us all we need to know about how to do this. I think that in the 60s, we did stop a war, that activism
Yeah.
did help to bring the Vietnam War to a close. And my students over the years have been far less activist than I would like for them to have been. But now some of them are quite a bit more activist than previous generations of students, and I'm encouraged by that. Now, it's always possible I mentioned Bill Coffin, William Sloane Coffin Jr., Greg will
Yeah.
know that name from Riverside Church, used to say there's a danger in spiritual pride, in wanting to be a mad prophet decrying the hypocrisies of our time. It feels good. We go out and we march, we come home and we think, there, I was with the right group of people. I had the best sign at the rally. I have done something. And you have done something, you just haven't done enough. And by enough, I don't mean quantitatively, I mean qualitatively. Then the most important witness that you can make is with your own life, which may seem insignificant. All of us think, well, what have I done to change things? Really? I mean, Greg probably thinks every time he finishes a sermon and puts those notes away or manuscript, whatever he uses, well, what did that do? What got accomplished? All those words just went out there into the sanctuary and then they fell to the floor, and then the custodian came along and swept them up and took them and dumped them and wherever they keep the old words. What's the good? What is the good of anything? I think it is an act of faith to believe that, Mary, if you don't ever march again, but you hold a door open for somebody, you have continued your work. And when you have a conversation with someone about why you marched when you were younger and why you wish you still could but can't, you may encourage someone else now to take up where you left off in a sort of continuum of witness. And I don't think any good deed ever goes away. And I talk more about that in the latest book when we talk about that at the end of our time. But I think a lot of small things have a significance out of all proportion to their size. And that we should never think that because we're not on the front lines, or we're not an author or a columnist or a talking head or whatever, that we're not making any change in the world. We're actually making change at the most local level, which is how the most important, effective, and long-lasting change happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, questions? Sure you've got them. Susan.
Yes, we've finished up the study on one book and are beginning to look at saving God from religion. What was the impetus to write this book?
Yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and blow myself completely out of the ecclesiastical waters. And never be heard from again. Well, actually, Saving Jesus from the Church has been the most successful book I've ever written. And there are probably many reasons for that. Whereas Saving God from Religion, first of all, fell into the black hole of the pandemic immediately after it got released. So we're still trying to recover from that. But the subject matter is more difficult for people. Jesus was a historical figure. I'm one of those people that thinks there was actually a Jesus of Nazareth who lived and had a brief public ministry and then was brutally executed as a revolutionary and then could not be kept dead. Okay, just one way to think about Easter. Whether it's martyrdom or physical resurrection, we can argue about all those things, but there is no argument about what his community did after his crucifixion. Something happened that was quite amazing and continues, or we wouldn't be in this Zoom call this morning. So it's a lot easier to write a book about Jesus as the most misunderstood figure in human history than it is to write a book about God, about which none of us know anything, period. I told my wife, I think I'm going to write a book about God. And she said, well, I'm glad you picked a small, manageable topic. And it took me a lot longer, and it was much more difficult, only because there's no real referent. There are just ideas and images and a lot of liturgy. But I am very, very, very disturbed with the patriarchal, white, daddy in the sky images that continue to infect our liturgies, our art, our everyday conversation, and the way in which we sort of co-opt God for whatever we need God for. Not only referring to God in exclusively masculine terms, almost always. Some people are beginning to push back against that. This idea that God even exists, like other things exist, like you and I exist, and the table I'm sitting next to exists, and the coffee cup I've been drinking from. These things exist. Why? How do we know that? Well, because once they did not, something brought them into being, and once they will not exist. Those are sort of some of the parameters of what it means to exist. I'm sorry if this is a little philosophical, but I don't think of God in terms of something that once wasn't, something else caused it to be, and someday it will not be. Those are somewhat problematic when I think about transcendence and the divine and the holy. So I have become a non-theist. I've been actually a non-theist my whole ministerial career. By that, I mean, I don't think of God as a person. And I also don't think of God as someone who occupies space somewhere, is processing prayer requests, answering some people affirmatively and other people saying no or wait or it's a mystery or whatever. Or sparing some people in natural disasters and plane crashes while allowing other people to die. I mean, there's just a whole host of theological horror stories we can all tell about people who said, well, I know what God's wanting in this situation or thinking or needing. I mean, it blows my mind. So I've become, I guess, more Buddhist in my understanding of God and the fact that human beings are the ones creating heaven on earth. We are the ones who are called to do the right things, and that the God isn't pulling strings. God is the string. And it's not that God does anything. It's that without God, nothing gets done. These are the things you'll read in the book when you read it. But this was probably in some ways a more heretical book than Saving Jesus from the Church. There are other progressive Christians who have a lot of these ideas about God. And, I hung out with Jack Spong. Jack Spong is the reason I'm an author. Okay, so you're Episcopal renegade who's now 90 and just wrote something to me the other day. And we've met on a number of occasions. He walked into HarperCollins in San Francisco and they asked him, who should we be reading and trying to publish? And Jack Spong said, Robin Meyers. If he had not said that, I wouldn't be here in this situation. And everything flowed from Bishop Spong's endorsement and his encouragement. We don't have the same ideas about everything, but he helped me out a lot. So this book, Saving God, they wanted to call it Saving God. I wanted to call it something entirely different, but I don't get to decide what the title is or the jacket design. That's something publishers by contract are tasked to do. Authors have all kinds of good ideas about titles and book covers. We just don't have the final word on them. So anyway, I wrote this book in a sense out of a feeling that lots of people were leaving the church because they just couldn't stand the God language we were using or the God concepts we were using, and yet they were still desperate to be in spiritual community with other people and to believe in something transcendent, some holy mystery that makes the universe, although incomprehensible, also purposeful, and makes us responsible to respond to the needs of one another, not just to our own needs. I mean, the continuum of the religious versus the irreligious is the more religious you are, the more selfless you are supposed to be. The less religious you are, the more selfish you tend to be or can be if it's not mitigated by any kind of spiritual life or discipline. We have the exact opposite situation in America today. The vast preponderance of people who claim to be deeply religious exhibit more selfish behavior, more judgmental, mean, arrogant, anti-intellectual, anti-science, anti-the other behavior than anyone else on the planet, which is a big part of the reason church is in precipitous decline. So I just wanted to deal with the God part of that and how that might affect prayer. And I took the tack that lots of these people that have left church love science, and I love science. And so I got into quantum physics and chaos theory and some other things that I think directly point to a mysterious interconnectedness of everything with everything else. And that we should live what I call the entangled life, where we don't, I mentioned to Mary, hold the door open for somebody. That doesn't sound like anything. Unless you're the person who got the door held open for you and you think, maybe I should do that to the next person who comes behind me. I'm going to pass it on. Well, you take a small thing like that. That's what chaos theory says. There's no variable too small to completely alter the outcome of complex systems. It was about weather, meteorology at first. And that's why that guy wrote that amazing paper, if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, will it cause a tornado in West Texas? It's the best title ever for a scientific paper. It has profound spiritual implications because we think if we're not doing big things, we're not changing the world by doing small things. And in fact, we can't keep from changing the world by everything we do, for good or for ill. And as you get older and you just look back over your life, look at the times when you were selfish or mean, or you said something you shouldn't have said, or you did something you shouldn't have done, and all the bad karma, all the grief that caused, that rippled out from that action. And conversely, how doing the simplest act of love also chains out and changes everything around you. Now, how does that happen? Well, I believe it's in the nature of creation itself for that to happen. So that just as when a bomb explodes, There are fragments of the original bomb in every piece of shrapnel as it heads out. So I think is God, whatever preceded the Big Bang, and continues to be present in everything, not just animate things, but inanimate things. That everything has a primal memory of when it was one thing. And then it was dispersed and became many things, but it's always sort of longing to call home, to bring ET back to this, phone home, to phone home. It's what we're doing in church a lot. We're phoning home. We're trying to remember where we came from, where we're going, and to whom we belong.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions, folks? I've got some.
I was just
Go ahead, David.
come from a, I come from a, well, not exactly evangelical, but a holiness background. We were Church of the Nazarene. I'm Episcopal. I'm coming to an Episcopal church because I've moved beyond that. As I was looking at the book, I was thinking to the people I come, that tradition I come from. A lot of those people are very, very sincere in their beliefs. And I was just thinking about how we can move to a place where you're sharing the importance of faith as not just a belief, but faith as a practice, following Jesus of Nazareth as a teacher and example, and still being able to incorporate people who still maintain that part of their faith, you know, and not trying to force them to divorce themselves from that faith. I understand the intellectual problems some people have, and some people, of course, have a middle position, maybe a mystical position. But I was just a little concerned about how you would address that issue of how we can work all that together, because as much as the church was separated when you wrote the book, it's even more so now. It was almost prophetic.
Right,
Yes.
right. I would say it's David, right? It's David? Okay. Again, I don't want to harken back to saying the same thing over and over again, but about all those people who hold very different beliefs than you do, or we do, or many of us about Christianity. What are your options but to love them? I mean, it's like in your family, you've got the crazy uncle, shows up at Thanksgiving and just says the worst things. Well, are you going to tell him he can't come to Thanksgiving anymore? I mean, so we end up redeeming both ourselves and other people by being kind and trying to be understanding. That does not mean we have to surrender what we believe or how we live. It means we shouldn't spend a lot of time or energy simply condemning what other people are doing, or not trying to understand why the life of faith as they understand it is so important to them. And let's face it, absolute certainty about things is that's narcotic. To be told exactly how everything is going to work out, what you should do, what you should believe. I could take, give me some of that. There's days when I could use just absolute certainty. I wouldn't even have to think anymore. I wouldn't have to be bothered by stuff. And I'm bothered by a lot of stuff, just like you guys are. So when I meet somebody who's absolutely certain they know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about Jesus, God, church, afterlife, the devil, you name it, whatever it is, I'm a little bit envious. But I also feel a little bit of sadness, because I know that person has questions, and that person may never have felt that it was safe to ask them. And you might be the person that is a safe space for them. And if you don't try to convert them to your way of thinking, but you guys just have a conversation about why you approach things differently, more change can take place that way than any other way. It used to be the way we sort of did politics in the United States. People would sort of throw their ideas out there, and we'd compromise a little bit and come to an agreement that was better than no agreement. We don't do that anymore. Everything is zero sum. It's zero sum in politics. It's zero sum in religion. It's zero sum in our families. It's zero sum about a pandemic which this little virus could care less who you are or what you believe about God or Jesus or Donald Trump. It's just looking for a place to live. Okay? It's looking for a host. So every unvaccinated person provides a host and prolongs the chance that we'll have a variant worse than Delta, because there'll be a variant after Delta, and then there'll be a variant after that, until we wipe it out, like we have almost some other diseases that vaccines allowed us to wipe out. And after 9/11, you've probably been watching some of the shows. There was an impromptu choir that sang on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, "God Bless America." And then 20 years later, a mob went up those steps and tried to stop the certification of the election with the intent to harm people, and killed 5 people and injured scores more. And we got that close to losing our country. That's how close we got. That's terrifying. It is what happened on January 6th in some ways is more terrifying than what happened on 9/11.
I agree.
So what do, David? We just try to be kind and listen and not make people feel like they're idiots or stupid or something if they believe differently. I wrote my book for people who are that close to leaving the church because they just don't believe anymore it has any value in their life. And so I got off on several other things for which I apologize, but I don't know if that's helpful. Be kind, and then if all else fails, be kind.
Wonderful. And I think Carolyn had a question, and then we'll go for a last call for questions after that.
No, I'm good.
Carolyn, you're good? Okay. Any other final questions, everybody? Just mindful of Robin's time.
And it doesn't have to be about the book, Brad.
Robin, I'm sorry I came late, but have to just let you know, I want to thank you after 40 plus years of Roman Catholicism and 20 years of Methodism and now of the Episcopal Church. Your book, the one lasting impact it will have on me, is forever changed my reading of the Nicene Creed.
Mm-hmm.
And we have discussed that as a group. And people have asked me about your book, and I have said, to me, what I've distilled is the pre-Easter Jesus and the post-Easter Jesus and the fundamental differences. And I've had some great conversations. So I just want to say thank you. This group has had really fantastic conversations around your book. We're really looking forward to the next book. And every Sunday now, instead of just saying those rote words, I'm thinking about them and do I really believe this? Yeah. And what components of this do I really believe? So thank you for the gift of disturbing me. It is a wonderful blessing.
Thank you, Brad. That is very kind. That you have no idea how heartwarming that is to hear, because anybody who writes books sometimes wonders, what are we doing? I mean, what difference does it make? And obviously, when you get to send out your thoughts undercover, as it were, and it gets out into New Lenox, Illinois, I didn't even know where that was. And then somebody named Brad reads it and is helped by it. That's magical. That makes me the most privileged person on earth, that I get to do that.
Well, thank you again.
And by the way, I know you all know what he's referring to. There's 2 things. There's not a word in the Sermon on the Mount about what to believe, only words about what to do and how to be in the world. And then by the time we get to the Nicene Creed, there's not a word in it about what to do or how to be in the world, only words about what to believe. That would be the great reversal. That and the Apostles' Creed, born of the Virgin Mary, comma, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was, and it goes on. The world's greatest life reduced to a comma. That's it. He's born, he suffers. Wait a minute. And the United Church of Christ has a comma as part of its national advertising campaign. They didn't realize how important that was. The life, the parables, the teachings, the healings, everything is reduced to a comma, which is exactly what the church has done with the life of Jesus. let's hurry up and get to what we believe so we'll know if we're going to heaven or not.
Beautifully said. And as I start to lead the sheep into worship where we say the creed again, I give everybody
Well,
to not speak it or not mean it if you're not feeling it. So
right. You just make sure they know that it's a signpost and not a hitching post.
there you go. That's fantastic. That's a great.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Robin, we are so grateful for your time, and we are just, I think everybody is a little bit more inspired, and now we're very excited for the next book. And I'm very excited to not just get through the pandemic for major reasons, but also that we'll be freed up to fly you out here and spend some time with all of us. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, I would love that. Let's get on the other side of it, and then let's meet in person. And Greg, I don't know if you know this or the class knows it, but there was a feature-length documentary film made about Mayflower, the church I pastored for 36 years, called American Heretics, The Politics of the Gospel. And it's an hour and 40 minutes, and it's about the unlikely ministry we did in the very conservative place that Oklahoma is, and why it seemed to be successful despite that it's crazy as far as most people are concerned. If I come up there, I'll bring the DVD. We can watch the film and have a discussion and some popcorn.
Perfect. It's not on Netflix. He has to bring it. Perfect.
I'll bring it.
Awesome. Robin, you're a gift to the church and to all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you. Yeah.
a great day, and
Be careful, everybody out there. Be careful.
Yes.
thank you all for being here, and take care.
Bye-bye.